Hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's Writers Speak Wednesday. I'm your host for this last evening in September, Ariana McLean. I am a current MFA student here at Stony Brook, and I'm broadcasting from my home in Brooklyn. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you're each in a comfy space, maybe curled up with a cup of tea or some heavier libation. Feel free to post questions or comments or any other good vibe sentiments in our chat. We'll be having a Q&A after tonight's reading. So I know the social unrest and pending presidential election is ripe on everyone's mind, but I don't want to harp on this heaviness this evening. And instead, I want to remind you all that joy is an act of resistance. Rest is an act of resistance. Art is an act of resistance, and this evening we are joyfully gathered together to hear the talented Regina Porter and to celebrate art and to celebrate the written word and the audible word. So seeing as Regina's debut novel, The Travelers, spans from the 1950s to Barack Obama's first year of presidency, and we are indeed knee-deep in this 2020 election, I want to share a bit from a piece I wrote as part of my MFA application to Stony Brook, reflecting on election night 2008. I cannot remember feeling such visceral pride for my country as I did that night. We were living in that future I thought I'd never see in my lifetime, a president that looked like me, and I got to vote for him. My vote mattered, our votes mattered. Progress was happening, hope was alive, change was here, and more was coming. Yes, we can. The catchphrase that carried Obama through his campaign reverberated in our living room as we hollered out in unison. You could hear it echoing from the adjacent apartments. And like any excited, impassioned group of young people whose energies could not be squashed, we were moved to take to the street. Hordes of students streamed into that cold night from other dorms, other residence halls, other apartments, all coming together in a congregation at the heart of our campus. And it pulsed. Our shared, overwhelming, primal feelings breathed life into the mass we'd created. We chanted, we danced, we sang, we howled like wolves at the full moon, and still our hungry spirits were not yet quenched. So I hope this brought you to a place of celebration, hope, and joy, an atmosphere I want to resound as I introduce our speaker for this evening, the award-winning writer, Regina Porter. Regina Porter is a graduate of the MFA Fiction program at the Iowa Writers Workshop, where she was an Iowa Arts Fellow and a Ray Armour West postgraduate scholar. Her writing has been published in the Harvard Review, Tin House, and the Oxford Review. She is also an award-winning playwright. Regina's debut novel, The Travelers, was nominated for the Edinburgh International Book Festival's first book award, France's Prix Médicis for foreign literature, and Grand Prize for American literature, a Barnes & Noble Discovery Notable Fiction title, It was longlisted for the 2020 Orwell Political Fiction Prize, and it was a runner-up for the 2020 Penn Hemingway. It was a runner-up for the 2020 Penn Hemingway Award for debut novel. The New Yorker praised The Travelers as a kaleidoscopic debut, sometimes summarizing a life in a few paragraphs, sometimes spending pages on one conversation. And as one character observes, we move in circles in this life. So without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to the wonderful Regina Porter. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Yes.
Indeed.
I am going to read an excerpt from The Travelers. It's a chapter called Minerva All Over the Place. And I think it's a good companion piece, Ariana, to what you just read. And we can talk after about why I chose this piece, and I'll just go right to it. Bear with me if my vision fades out sometimes. So, Minerva All Over the Place, and it is 2009. When they posted the sign for the playwriting contest, I didn't think much about it. I was on academic probation because my grades had slipped to mostly C's and D's, and I'd been kicked out of the school orchestra for not showing up for rehearsals, and my viola sat in a corner by the TV collecting dust because my mom's was hoping that I would take an interest in it again. There was the Suzuki synthesizer too, a gift from my dad, when he learned that I quit the viola because his thing is, when you get stuck, try something else to unstuck yourself. The first week I got the synthesizer, I tinkered around with it. I wanted to make Mom feel like shit because it's more or less basically all her fault that our dad walked. When Dad slipped the way men just do, instead of her going off and slipping herself, Mom calls a confessional session in the living room so we can talk out shit. Like I want to hear Dad fuck some bitch. And it's one of those sessions where everyone's supposed to stay calm and speak in turn. But then, of course, we're all taking sides. My brother Peanut, he's like, "You did what?" And Dad looks at Peanut because he wonders, like I do sometimes, if maybe Peanut's half a fag. Not that I care. Some of my best friends are fags in LaGuardia. And I'm like, now what? Now what? And Mom makes Dad feel all bad. And Dad explains that he's not going to do it again. She was a fellow officer, and they were bonding over the stresses of being cops. And Mom's nodding, and then we're all making up and keeping happy-go-lucky. And for a while, everybody and everything is chill. But then Mom starts getting perked up. She comes home and she's not wearing the dark ass lipstick that our cousin Gladys used to ride her about. And Mom cuts the dead hair off her split ends. And then she actually puts in a texturizer, and her curls hang natural like Auntie Claudia's. And she's wearing Elizabeth Arden perfume. And I say, loud enough to start a tsunami in our living room, "Dad, did you buy Mom Elizabeth Arden perfume?" And I get a kick saying this, and Mom's cussing me out for messing with her swag. And Dad says, "But you've never liked perfume. Perfume gives you a headache." "Maybe my hormones are in flux," Mom says, "because now I can tolerate the scent." But Dad's too sharp for that. He catches her one day at the food stand near Columbia Presbyterian, sharing a cigarette with this old dude. She admits to having a fling with this old ass dude with a bad leg named Chico, who sells roti and other food out of a food truck. because he got priced out of Bed-Stuy. And mom's is like, we mostly just talk. Well, maybe we kissed once. Dad knew all the ways a man and a woman could kiss. And that's when dad starts cutting his eyes at mom and skipping dinner. And then he starts going out and hanging with the crew at work he'd always called a whoring ass bunch of men. And dad's coming home late like every night. And mom's working and cooking dinner and putting the twins to bed. And then they begin fighting all the time. And Peanut and I get in the middle. And it's poor people's drama, Jerry Springer level drama. And dad says, how does he even know the twins are his? The twins don't look the first thing like him, which is total bullshit. He says maybe Keisha and Lamar are the food truck guy's kids. And mom says that's ridiculous because Chico still had the store in Bed-Stuy then. And dad says how she knows what Chico had. That's not all Chico had. And dad left. And mom threatened to take out a restraining order on him. And Peanut and I are like, Mom, you can't do that. Dad will lose his job. And dad's like, she would do that to me? Damn, that's low. And he moves to Arizona because he knows some other cops out there. He makes a big deal about moving to Phoenix. And I think he's expecting mom to beg him not to go. It's like once he says he's leaving, he's got to follow through. And they are both stuck on stubborn. I wish they would go back together, but then mama, she can't be alone or lonely. So she falls into something with Chico, and there's no turning back. Dad's out and Chico's in. I'm like, fuck this. And she's like, watch your mouth and show adults respect. I pay the rent here. So I start staying out with my friends and skipping school just because I feel like it. And my teachers say, oh yeah, well, here's to your grades plummeting. And then I'm like, so what? And then they say, one more semester and it's over. You're out of here. And I'm like, shit, no. They'll send me to school with remedial kids. My little brother Peanut is gloating because he's at Bronx Science and thinks he's the next Steve Jobs. That's when I hit the books and school again. Will not be showed up by Peanut. And that's when I see the poster about the playwriting contest and Professor Bass, who is too old to be teaching high school, but the damn union can't fire him, says, you could probably write something decent if you weren't so arrogant. He says, half the students in the school don't deserve to be here. And I roll my eyes and say, well, what if you were me and you weren't supposed to be here? What would you write about for a 15-minute play contest? And Professor Bass says, not about hiking in Madagascar or fly fishing in Mongolia. Write about something that comes from the old tinker. And that's when I ask my stupid ass mom questions while she's lapping her coffee and eating Dunkin' Donuts, because now that dad's gone, she's picked up a few pounds again. She says, Minerva, there's a lot of people who, if they had come up in a different time, they might have done great things. Your grandpa was one of them. And I'm like, how is this new information? She tells me to call Grams. And Grams, she's just glad I picked up the phone. Grams tells me about the play Gramps found on the boat in Vietnam. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. The one Auntie Claudia kept. I get mad with mom all over again for being such a second-class citizen. I write a play about a man on a boat reading Shakespeare and then cut to his daughters reading the same play later while he is dying. And I win second prize. And when I show Professor Bass the play, he spills his coffee on his raggedy ass tweed blazer he always wears and bursts out crying. I brace for another lecture on the sorry state of the arts in New York City and the artist's struggle for dignity in the face of adversity, or how maybe if he had stayed in Europe when he was younger, things would be different. But Professor Bass wipes his eyes with a handkerchief that he removes from his faded corduroy pants. Nicely done, he says. And I get a ribbon and $25 for my second place prize. And I have Peanut meet me at the drama bookshop in Times Square. And we pick up Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. They wrap it in nice navy blue wrapping paper. And we head home. I show Mom my second place ribbon and give her the play. I am pissed at her for having not bought her own copy years ago. Mom tries to hug me, and I step out of arm's reach. I have somewhere to be, but Mom's not having it. She grabs hold of me tight. And we stand there like that for a hot minute. And I don't fight it because maybe she needs the hug more than I do. Maybe. And when she's holding me, I remember being little and how she used to read to me all the time. When I leave, Mom's still in the living room, leafing through the play. And I know just for once, I got it right.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
I loved the humor. I loved the voice of Minerva. I loved the vivid details. Can you tell us a little bit why you chose to read this piece this evening?
Well, I was thinking honestly a little about a debate last night, and I thought it would be very nice to have a female voice and a young female voice. And I was doing what I call novel math, and I say it's 2009, and maybe then Minerva is 16. So she would be around 27 now. I wonder what, since she is written in the book as a New Yorker, what her life would be like now, what Black Lives Matter would be like now, as a 27-year-old. I see every time we write something, we are in conversation with the world around us, but it also pivots to the future. And I see that. I kind of feel that energy, that youthful energy that is so much part of the movement now is there in 2009 in that voice. And it makes me wonder about the youthfulness of the Black Lives Matter movement and of this current time. So she's very much of this moment, even in that moment. And you see how the threads of a character who is completely fiction link up with our present moment. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes.
So many people in our chat are clapping to those sentiments there, to the youthful voice, to the female voice, and Black Lives Matter. So you write, this book has so many characters, delicious characters, dimensional characters. How do you go about sort of forming them all? I mean, you're speaking about Minerva so lovingly, and I wonder how you develop all your characters and how you work with them.
One character at a time. The first story in the novel is the first story I wrote, and the second story was the second story I wrote. But then after that, the stories were pretty non-linear, and then I had to go back and sort of piece together how the characters' relationship. So for me, it's a matter of Beverly, one of the mother of Minerva. Once I had a clear sense of who she was, then I was able to establish who Minerva is in this story, where they converge and where they separate, and the sort of generational struggles between mothers and daughters. So yeah, and history.
Amazing.
Yes,
And
yes,
history, yes.
yes.
I'm very interested in how writers use and manipulate forms, and I know that you are actually also a playwright, having
Yes.
studied the dramatic arts. So could you talk to us a little bit about how maybe this background in drama and playwriting informs your prose writing and vice versa? This chapter was actually entitled Monologue, so I feel like that's a hint there
Yes.
for me already.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think, say, some of my favorite writers, Toni Morrison, Fitzgerald, if you think about the party scene, I've said this many times before, the party scenes in The Great Gatsby, that would be the equivalent, if you're talking about structure, of a Greek chorus. And if you think about the town, say in Sula, or in so many, or even the church women in Beloved, in so many of Miss Morrison's work, you have a chorus at play, which also is in Zora Neale Hurston too. So I feel like these different forms, we call them playwriting, we call them short stories and novels, we call them music, we call them painting. For me, there's so much overlap. And so I might go and sit and stare at an image in a museum. I miss museums so much because there's so much a part of my writing. I might go and stare at Chagall, say, I in the Village. And from every angle, you can see a different story or a different point of view. So I learn a lot about point of view from paintings. I think I've also said this before. Georgia O'Keeffe said the first thing an artist learns how to do is where to draw a line down the center of the page. That's point of view. That's perspective. So that's an example of how visual artists and writers are in conversation. As far as playwriting, you hear the voice so clearly. I think Minerva's voice, that I don't use the I, the first person, very much in the Travelers. When I do, it's very specific. I want to establish a certain intimacy with the characters. And so I think playwriting serves me very well in those moments, and also with the natural flow of dialogue, So, yes.
Yes. We had a question about process, and I'm going to sort of combine it with another question to learn a little bit about your writing process. I know a lot of students here at Stony Brook are generally interested in hearing how other writers, what their process, what their routine is like. Do you have any traditions or rituals that you do as you start a new piece, or maybe during a piece that you're working on?
Well, I can't do anything without coffee, I'll tell you that. And I will say that when I'm really, really immersed in my writing, I'm awful in that I might have 5 or 6 cups of coffee a day. And I afterwards, once I have the whole draft, I try to pull it back for my health. I also, I'm talking about now rituals that don't seem like they directly influence writing, but they do. I have a dog. I walk the dog several times a day. It gets me out. it gives me a break to see the world. Sometimes talking again about the first person, one of the challenges for writers, especially when we're young, is to stick with that first person so closely that there's not any world building. And it took me a while to realize, getting up from my seat, my writing chair, and going out and walking around the block and seeing the neighbors. So walking, I'm drawing a picture. That's an aspect of world building that then comes back when I sit down, and it informs the writing. So it informs the descriptive passages. So I would say those are two rituals. I also listen to music a great deal. For example, for some of the Vietnam segments, I listen to the Rolling Stones. I listen to Morrison. I listen to just a number of people. Sometimes I listen to Al Green. You know, I try to have a sense of what the characters might like, and that grounds me. I listen to Love Child for Eloise. So music lands me in place. Music gives me permission to be very sentimental, and then I can pull back. A little melodrama is not a bad thing. Sometimes we're too smart for our own good. So you can always pull back from melodrama. I don't know if you can pull back from a lack of compassion, though, um, in your character. So I think about those things a lot. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow, so good to hear. I can see you listening to the music and sort of letting your mind take you to new places. That's really lovely. I also find a lot of inspiration in music and visual art as well. And I am going to take that little note you said about walking outside. I do sometimes. I tend to write in first person and want to grow and do more world building. So I'm going to use that note. Especially in this pandemic, I feel like sometimes I get stuck in my house for long periods of time.
Sometimes it's also good too to write a first draft or early drafts in the first person, and then transition to the second or third person. So you open up, but that's a way in sometimes to really understanding certain aspects of your character. I want to go back and talk about music, because I think about this quite a lot. There is a singer from the 80s, John Cougar Mellencamp, and sometimes I walk around even now singing his lyrics. And when I was writing one story, like say the summer season or the moving man stands still, there was this one family, the Camphor family. And I'm fascinated around issues of class. And John Cougar Mellencamp has this fabulous line. I think it's from When the Walls Come Crumbling Down. It says, "Some people say I'm obnoxious and lazy." I think that's right. "I'm uneducated. My opinion means nothing, but I know I'm a real good dancer. I don't need to look over my shoulder to see where I'm at." Now, I think he wrote that song in the late 80s, early 90s. That song is in sync so clearly with how a lot of Trump voters feel. And So when I wrote Seamus and Charles Camphor, I played that song obsessively, and it resonates now. It still resonates in the moment now, and it helped me to understand Seamus and Charles Camphor's psychology without condescending to them. And I did that consistently for Eddie, each character. For Agnes, I found a piece of music that allowed me to engage with the characters.
Wow. Kaylin, a student here at Stony Brook, says that you have such a deep connection with your characters. Have you ever reused them or versions of them, older or younger, in other works or across works, rather?
Not intentionally. I mean, sometimes I think you might, writers do revisit characters. There's similarities. That's how, but no, I don't think so. These characters are very specific to this world. I think I had to be at a certain point to write these characters, to have the empathy, again, empathy being a very important word to write these characters, and to have a sort of emotional distance to know when to pull close, when to draw back. Yeah. So.
I want to switch gears to kind of talking about the other side of writing after you finished your manuscript. So first, I want to transition in saying, do you find yourself, okay, let's say when you finished The Travelers, was there a loss in ending the relationship with these characters as you sent it off into the world, or was that not the case? Maybe this is just me being very emotional.
I think there's a period, once I finished the first draft, I had to put it down for a little. I knew a little while, a few weeks, I knew that it needed work. And I knew I would have to go back and rewrite, but I didn't trust myself. Sometimes you have to know when to just let the work sit. And I did that. And like most writers, when I sent it to my agent, I told myself, oh, I'm not going to think about it. But of course I did. And I tried to do things to distract myself. I had an old writing teacher who said, you should always be working on the next project. That's good in theory, it's hard in practice. I was exhausted from writing the book. I did not have the emotional capacity to start something new, even though that might be healthy. And so I think that waiting period where you're waiting to hear it, or to find out if this piece that has consumed you for several years will register with readers or with your agent, with potential publishers. It's it's a very intense period. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
I can imagine. It's such a vulnerable
yes.
act to put work out into the larger world. Could you speak to the process of editing after with your editor? So, the process of working with your editor on this novel.
Well, first off, I want to say I am very fond of my editor. I will work with her again. And one of the things I loved about her was, you see, I incorporate pictures in this novel, and I don't think the novel would work without them. So for me, it was very important to have an editor who would keep her their word, as far as not insisting that I take out the pictures. And one of the first things she said was, I love this book. I will keep the pictures. And she's the kind of editor who goes in and say, I think I had 350 pages or maybe 360 when I started. And I think I got it down to 319 or so. And I tell you, sometimes the cuts were so seamless and easy. We barely disagreed. And I think that there was something kind of wonderful about that. One of the things I think a lot of writers don't realize, I didn't realize it at first, is sometimes there's a waiting period between the time you sell your book and before you get those first round of edits. And that it feels like, usually it could be like 4 months, but it can feel like a year, when you want to see what those edits are. And then once you get those edits, it's a long process. Say I sold my book in 2017 and it came out in October 2017, I think it was, and it came out in June 2019, and I'd been working on it for a couple of years before. So that's a huge span of time. It requires patience and a connection. You need that connection so you don't become complacent or bored with your characters. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. I think I'll just ask one last question for this evening. Do you have any, this is from Rachel, do you have any literary techniques that you specifically were using in The Travelers? Or are there any specific literary techniques that you tend to use to give your characters more dimension and connect with the audience?
Oh, techniques. Oh my gosh. Well, as I said, dialogue is important. If she's asking in terms of character building, when I teach, I sometimes have students go out and shop for their characters. Again, so I might think, oh, my character would eat this, my character wouldn't eat that. What is a good meal to my character? Because food is so important to us. It's culturally important. We need it to survive. And I won't call this a technique, I'd call this a necessity. I think about characters' jobs. Your jobs, a person's job often defines his or her life. And so if I can have a sense of what someone's job is, I can also start thinking about how that job affects the relationship in the family. Say, for example, Minerva's dad is a cop. Her mom's a nurse. Her Aunt Claudia is an academic. She gets that book, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, right? So it establishes class dynamics, the jobs, so much. So for me, I think about jobs. I think about place, point of telling, point of view. But I really just try most of all to follow where I think my characters are taking me, because a lot of times you can apply the technique later once you understand or come to know the person you're trying or persons you're trying to create.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope you don't mind. I'm going to put you on the spot as you did to me backstage. Is there anything you're working on now that you feel comfortable sharing?
I had a piece. It's an excerpt from something new. Again, I was writing. I had this whole idea for a novel, and I was into it. And then the pandemic hit, and for a while, like so many writers, I couldn't do anything. And then one day, I went over to Park Slope, and I saw something that just sort of got to me, and since then, I have not been able to go back to what I was going to write, um, and that's what I'm working on. And I'm listening to a lot of Prince. Do you know? Again, uh, you can't underestimate. I was thinking about. I think there was an article recently in the Times, which I haven't read, but I was thinking about When Doves Cry. Dig, if you will, the picture of you and I engaged in a kiss that's very intimate, right? And then at one point, he switches to his parents. So he world builds, right? And so the movement, going back to the question about technique, I like to always try to answer students' questions. The movement of a song with that beginning, a middle, and an end is invaluable for what it can teach you about the movement of a story or the movement of your novel. So in this, Prince is very central. His songs are, he's absolutely the right person for me. Somehow I knew intuitively, oh, I'm going to listen to Prince, a lot of Prince while I'm working on this new piece. And that's just the way it is. Yeah.
So. Amazing. Thank you. I'm gonna put on some Prince right after this.
Well, put on what you love. Put on what you love.
Oh, I love Prince, so don't worry about that. You just inspired me to put some on.
He's
going
amazing.
off topic a little bit. Yeah, and then
yeah.
One of the things that got me through this pandemic was definitely music. At the beginning, there were so many DJs who were playing live sets, and DJ Questlove did an excellent week of sets, all dedicated to Prince and his deep tracks. And it was, it really helped me through some hard times. Yeah, they're on YouTube, on the Roots page. But anyways, thank you so much. I think we've come to a close for the evening. You've said such great things. I think a lot of our audience was inspired. I know I was. I learned a bunch of things. I'm excited to try some techniques that you suggested. So thank you for sharing. It means a lot, your honesty. Yeah.
One last thing I want to say. Well, you can't do it right now, but one of the things I would tell students to do too was take a notebook sometime and listen to a conversation. And then you can write it down, but sometimes just listen and see how much you can remember, because then you're learning how to listen to the rhythm of how people speak. No two people speak exactly the same way. So it's a test. Sometimes write down the dialogue, and then sometimes just listen and go home and see if you can capture that rhythm. And you can do it with your family too, just so you learn to pace the rhythm of dialogue, those pauses. That's it. All right. We're out of here.
Thank you. I mean, dialogue I love reading dialogue, and I think it takes such craft to really get that rhythm and and unique dialogue for different characters or voice. So thank you. And I will thank everyone at home watching. I want to thank Stony Brook University, the MFA program for creative writing and film, for hosting this lovely evening, Kaylin Cowson for designing our event poster, Frank Imperiale for making this technological feat a reality. And you've been such a light, Regina. And so I want to end on a quote that my mother actually recently shared with me from Sojourner Truth. I will not allow the light of my life to be determined by the darkness around me. So good evening, everyone. And
that's lovely.
Take care.
Things good. Yes. Bye-bye.